So whether you wanted to use a cookie, a mobile ad ID, a hashed email, a hashed phone number, a probabilistic ID, whatever you come up with could be subject under the AMI framework. One of the foundational elements of the ad choices program has been that consumers see the ad choices icon and associate it with trust, associate it with a better consumer experience. There will be a way for brands and publishers to communicate to consumers through an icon-based solution where they can effectively trump it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Growth Genius series brought to you by DAA Asia and Infidigit. My name is Shelly, and I'm the Country Director, Americas at Infidigit. I'm also the founder and director at DAA Asia. My guest today is Lou Mastria, Executive Director of the Digital Advertising Alliance, where he leads US and global efforts for self-regulation, consumer transparency, and choice in the delivery of interest-based advertising online. A very warm welcome, Lou.
Shelly, thank you very much. And thank you for the kind words. I look forward to a great conversation.
Great. So to start with, tell us a little about your DAA journey, how it started and what has been achieved so far.
Thanks. That's a great opening. So DAA was founded in 2008 and 9 by the leading trade associations here in the United States, representing the digital advertising industry. And that included the brand side marketers through our board member, the Association of National Advertisers, the agencies through the 4As, the publishers through IAB, at that time, DMA US, which represented a lot of the marketers as well as the ad tech community. And then later on, two additional organizations joined us, the NAI, which focuses on ad tech, and the American Advertising Federation, which focuses on agencies as well. And the growth was really astounding because in some ways, we were asking companies to commit and up-level their privacy standards. And so there was a great bit of uncertainty as to whether that would work. But the reality is that many companies were looking for a tool, a solution set that allowed them to do that work in a way that respected the fact that they also have businesses. And so a way to balance privacy as well as their business needs so that they can continue to give consumers what they wanted while at the same time being respectful of their privacy. And so where we are today is many years later is we've delivered the ad choices icon now at rates of over 1 trillion times a month globally. We are in 36 countries in 28 languages. We are easily, as one publisher told us, we are easily the single most published element on the web right now. And so that didn't happen because I'm here or because DAA is great, although it is. It happened because of the investment that companies made in their own brand equity to deal with proactively with consumer concerns about privacy.
Great. That's really great. So my next question is that in the cookie-less future, how relevant is DAA program now, and what are your new initiatives?
It's a good question that a lot of marketers are thinking about today, for sure, Shelly. The reality is that DAA's principles are purposely made so that they are technology neutral. And so we never had to worry about the change, for example, from cookie to probabilistic IDs, because our principles applied equally in both cases, nor did we have to worry about the change from cookies to mobile ad IDs. Again, the principles applied. And so as we look at a future that has, whether it's hashed emails or hashed phone numbers or some other new identity type, it doesn't really matter. The self-same responsible set of practices, the guidelines and the guardrails really for privacy will be able to apply in those areas as well. And so recently what we've done is undertaken a broad review of where we stand, where the market stands in terms of its ability to apply these to a new area. And we've come up with some new certifications to help marketers address those needs in a future. Now, whether that future is cookieless or not is immaterial to us. What is important is that there are guardrails about that future. And those guardrails are falling under a rubric that's called the Addressable Media Identifier Framework. And that framework will guard not only what a brand does, but also the brand's equity and its relationship, the special relationship it has with its consumers, because it looks forward and says, it doesn't matter what the technology, I'm going to either use this data in a permitted way, or if it's prohibited, I will not collect or use the data in that area. And so those are two fundamental shifts in the way that the industry approaches consumers. It is also backed up by more than a decade of independent enforcement through DAA, as well as a robust certification process through our partners at TrustArc.
So besides cookies, what are other types of AMIs in use nowadays?
The beauty of the AMI structure is, again, we followed our technology neutral mandate. We didn't care. So whether you wanted to use a cookie, a mobile ad ID, a hashed email, a hashed phone number, a probabilistic ID, whatever you come up with could be subject under the AMI framework. It could be tested under the AMI framework and proven to be either inside, so an AMI, a certified AMI, or not. And so for brands, this is an easy way to solve for a lot of the, frankly, new terminology and jargon that's coming out regarding identifiers, to simply ask, are you a DAA AMI certified identifier or not? And if you are, maybe we give you some additional privileges. If you're not, then maybe we ask you to go get certified through this industry standard process.
So you were talking about the policy framework. What does the AMI policy framework entail, and where is this being deployed?
So what it entails most specifically is, number one, there's a certification, a third-party certification that happens right at the outset for the identifier. And so if a company subjects itself to that, that's a fairly strenuous level of rigor that it puts itself under. If it passes that, then it is allowed to go into the market and say that it is an AMI certified identifier. In doing so, what it promises, what that company is promising, is that things like permitted uses are allowed, prohibited uses are put to the side and not allowed, and then there's a middle tier of uses that are permitted only in an opt-in environment. There are other parts of the framework that deal with differing legislative and regulatory requirements in different geographies. So a multinational company could easily adopt the AMI framework. And so for a brand who needed to enhance its audience, find the largest audience possible, you can use the opt-out framework in the opt-out environment. For a brand that either for regulatory or legislative reasons, or for its own marketing reasons, chooses to only use opted-in audiences, they can do that as well. And the AMI certification looks at that in advance. And so a company that has been certified is not allowed to go to market and market itself as an AMI framework unless it has a way to differentiate between those opt-in and opt-out audiences. And so that is a really part of the novelty that's brought to the market from this framework. And what a brand gets out of the fact that DAA is pushing this is that there's a standard. There's one way to do this. And so you as a brand can be sure that it is being applied equally to all the companies that perhaps are responding to your RFP. Now, we are first rolling this out in the US, but we are looking to see how it adopts and how much traction it gets here in the States. And as it does that, we will look to other markets. This is very similar to the way we rolled out the ad choices icon back in the day, and also some of the other tools that we've rolled out over time.
Okay, that's great. So how soon will certified AMIs be in the ad tech marketplace?
We think the very first one actually will be in market before the end of the year. And so we will look for a few more right after that. But don't forget, this is a pretty significant step that we're asking identifier companies to take. And so I wouldn't be surprised if it's slow going for a little bit. But I think in 23, we will see a few more companies come to the market. But I do think that we'll be able to get one through the process before the end of the year.
Okay, so who do you think are the early adopters of certified AMIs? Can you name any companies?
I could, and then I could be fired. I think what you'll see, and we've seen this already in some of our early conversations, is that the identity provider market has been growing. Now, it's not huge. I don't think it's in the hundreds, but I do think it's probably in the 50 to 100 number, somewhere in there. And we have seen some interest from a good number of folks in that market, particularly the leaders, the big companies in that space. And those, no surprise, are the first ones to raise their hands. But again, because there is an independent third-party certification, the path from raising my hand to actually doing it is a little bit fraught, and for purpose, because we want to make sure that these companies know what they're doing eyes wide open. So I think you're going to see the identifier market companies start first. But what we're seeing, and this is a little bit of a surprise to us, a pleasant surprise, was that as we were talking to brands and we were talking to publishers, they were asking, what can they do to support this? Now, that's an unusual request, because this is, after all, a voluntary standard. But what they are seeing is that there is value for their customers in having this standardized framework. And so what they're asking is, how can I go into the market and be able to vet my vendors with this framework in mind? And so what we've seen is a number of publishers and brands come back to us and say, okay, so what can I put in my RFPs? What can I put in my T's and C's such that I give some privilege, some account for the fact that an identifier company may have taken this really big step in terms of consumer privacy.
So this is a great self-regulatory initiative, but how does it work in regulated environments like GDPR, DMA, DSA in Europe, and CCPA in the States, and Canada's PIPEDA, etc.? So how will this work in those environments?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And certainly one of the things that we wrestled with a great deal as we were bringing this to market was that for many years, and I think you know this, the DAAs would look at particular markets and try to function just within that market. With this framework, we really did look at places outside the US, outside the normal areas that we look at. Part of that was that the group of companies and organizations that helped influence and lend input to this really did come from beyond the US. It was, I think there was 300 to 400 companies in total and organizations that contributed to this. And many of those are multinationals, and many of them were from outside the US. And so that input meant that we had to create a framework that allowed for opt-in and opt-out environments. And so the AMI framework does allow for that. And so when we test, does your identifier support the framework? We're looking for tests that actually do both. Can we see that you have an opt-in audience Can we see that you have an opt-out audience? And do you have controls in place for those things? And so that's how we tend to approach that.
Hey, if I'm a brand or publisher, a would-be user of AMIs, what should I be doing to ensure the addressable media solutions I'm using conform to these industry privacy strictures and expectations?
So I think that that's pretty easy right now. We'll come back with some additional guidance, but with more specific guidance for each group, publishers and brands. But I think right now what you can do is simply ask your identity provider, say, hey, look, we've heard about this AMI framework. We're interested. We want you to talk to us about how you're seeing this, how you're either applying this framework or why you've chosen not to apply it. And start that conversation, because I think even though it's early days and we certainly have put a push into the market and we have had some companies already start their initial attestation stage, the reality is it really does need market demand. And so if you're a brand, if you're a publisher, and you know that your future will rely increasingly in privacy protective standards, this one is a perfect one for you to be launching some of those initiatives inside your own organizations with, by bringing in identity providers who have themselves gone through a fairly rigorous certification process.
What does this addressability mean to the consumer? Will this help brands to gain customer trust?
Absolutely. I think one of the foundational elements of the Ad Choices program has been that consumers see the Ad Choices icon and associate it with trust, associate it with a better consumer experience. And so as we look at the AMI framework, we absolutely see that there's a path to that in brands and publishers adopting that and showing that off to consumers. Part of the idea here is that there will be a way for brands and publishers to communicate to consumers through an icon-based solution where they can effectively trumpet the fact that they themselves are doing vendor vetting based on this framework, and that their suppliers are going through this framework prior to becoming embedded with them. And so for a consumer who continues to want relevant messaging, the right message at the right time, for the right relevance, who continues to want the ad-supported, ad-subsidized internet, what this means is that they not only will continue to have choices about how these things work, but they will also inherit some of the safeguards that are built into the AMI framework. And that is an incredibly powerful tool, particularly because the consumer doesn't have to do anything. They just get it. As soon as the brand or publisher they work with allows a AMI certified identity provider to go through, that means that that website or that app or that device suddenly has all those safeguards built into it. Now, I will say this too, on the choice side, the consumer will also be getting additional choice options. So for example, today, as you know, we support cookie-based choice. We support mobile ad ID-based choice, but we've recently launched a hashed email ID-based choice. And so that will be coming out there. We've also launched a category-based choice platform for consumers. And so consumers can actually go in and tell companies, hey, look, I don't want to get the dating ads, or I just bought a car, please don't send me the car ads, et cetera, et cetera. And so all of this is being made possible by frameworks like AMI.
While you told me that while this is initially a US focused program, so do you think there's going to be global application for such certified AMIs?
Absolutely. In fact, that's part of the plan. We're starting to roll it out in the US only because we had the infrastructure to start here first. But any of the DAA programs today could simply start to roll it out in their jurisdictions as soon as they're ready. Some are more ready than others. Some have other issues that they're dealing with. So I think that there's it's going to be a little bit of a stair step. But at the end of the day, this will be a global program.
Well, this is a great initiative, Lou. I hope more countries will follow the footsteps to launch this program for their brands and consumers. Now to our last segment. Tell us about any one passion you follow and how it helps elevate your profession.
I hate talking about myself, but I think the one thing that I like to do a lot, and I've actually been lucky enough to be able to do it with a lot of industry colleagues, is I like to cycle. And so everything from taking tours to just doing 15, 20 miles with a number of colleagues and peers, or frankly, even spin classes with some colleagues and peers. It's been a great way to not only form and reinforce the bonds that are necessary in an industry like ours, but it's also been instructive in terms of the kind of mental focus and the kind of necessary persistence that is part of how to succeed in such a dynamic industry. There are things, as you know, Shelly, that change day in and day out in the digital ad ecosystem. And so being able to look at the long road ahead of you and know that that's where you're going, regardless of cross-cutting traffic, regardless of impediments in the road, regardless of the hill that you might have to climb.
Yeah.
And that has been a really terrific way to spend my off time with colleagues and peers. And I think it's brought some really good lessons to what I do for a living. And I've enjoyed it for those reasons. Thank you for asking that.
That's a great passion. And so how can our viewers reach you, connect with you? How can they follow you?
If you have to email me, I'm at lou@aboutads.info. If you want to know anything about DAA, just go to digitaladvertisingalliance.org. If you want to follow us, I think we are at DAA USA. I think those are, well, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me other places as well, but those are the primary channels.
Thank you so much, Lou. It was a very informative conversation. To everyone who is watching this show, please subscribe to this channel. Also, watch out this space for the next episode of Growth Genius series. Till then, peace.